everybody to mute themselves. I think I have everybody muted at the moment, but if we could stay muted during Jared's presentation, it cuts down on background noise a little bit. If you do have any questions, feel free to pop them into the chat and we will definitely get those answered for you. My name's Cherie. I'm the horticulture agent at CSU Extension in Pueblo County. I just have a few slides I wanted to show you today, this morning, to introduce the seed library to you in case you're new, which I did see some new names on the participant list. So in case you haven't really participated with us before. So how to use the All Pueblo Grows Seed Lending Library. I should mention that the seed library is a partnership between the Pueblo County Master Gardeners and the Pueblo City County Library District. And we will have these monthly educational events on the last Saturday of every month for until October. And so since you registered, you have the link. It's the same link every month. So I hope to see you joining us in the other months coming. So how to use the library. It's a little bit different nowadays with COVID. We, of course, still have our seed library at the Rawlings Library in Pueblo, which is the photo on the right. So you can check out seeds from the library using your library card from the actual seed library, but we've really been ramping up our efforts on what we call the little seed libraries, which an example of that is on the left here. These are little boxes in people's yards all around town, and we are making it kind of easy and contactless for you to be able to find seeds in your neighborhood, not have to have any contact with anybody, and be able to just get the seeds that you would like. So what we're doing this year is we're doing kits. We're making some kits of seeds, and there will be a request form that you can fill out, and you can request a kit to be dropped off at a little seed library of your choosing. And then we will get it in there for you, and you can go get your seeds and start growing. So that request kit will be coming out this week. You can check our website at allpueblogrows.org, to get the link, and I will also probably be sending out an email if you get our emails. If you don't get our emails, you can sure shoot me an email and I can get you on the list, but check our website this week for that request kit and to get your seed kit requested. So that's kind of step one, is checking out the seeds. Step two, of course, is grow your seeds, and we are here to support you through that for the whole season. Attend our monthly educational sessions via Zoom this year, and we will guide you through the season, how to grow your plants, how to care for them, and of course, how to save seed. Master Gardeners will be available at all of these monthly events to answer your questions and help you get growing. And then step three, of course, is to return your seeds at the end of the season. So like I said, we will definitely be covering how to save seed a couple times this year in our educational events. So once you learn how to save your seed, save it from your garden and then return it to us. You could either return it to the library, the Rawlings Library. There's a bin under the seed catalog. You can return it to the extension office once we're open to the public. Right now, we're still closed down for the time being. Or you can return it to a little seed library near you. New this year, when you return your seeds, if you could leave your name and your email, as well as all the information that you have, what it is, if you have a variety available, where it was grown, when it was harvested, give us all that information and your email, and you'll be entered in a drawing to win a prize. And we'll pick somebody who returns seeds at the end of the year to win a prize for returning those seeds. So any questions about that, feel free to type it into the chat and I will get those answered for you. In the meantime, I would like to introduce Jared Miera, who is one of our master gardeners, and he will be doing our presentation today on starting seeds indoors, which it is January, a little bit cold outside. I'm in Breckenridge, Colorado today, and it is snowing, but it is time to think about starting those seeds. So Jared is going to guide us into the growing season with this presentation. So I will turn it over to him, and Jared, you should be able to share your screen now.
Perfect. Good morning. Nice to see 21 participants this morning. I wish we were able to meet in person. I'm finally used to Zoom after 9 months of operating through Zoom. So I appreciate everybody's participation. Feel free to type in any questions in the chat, and then at the end, there will definitely be opportunities to ask questions and then just share amongst ourselves strategies, tips, frustrations, all that might come along with starting seeds indoors. If you've been to any presentations that I've made, I always like to give the disclaimer that I'm not an expert by any means. I do have a name tag that says Master Gardener, but I'm learning every year, every day. So a lot of what I present on is kind of based on my experience, a lot of my opinion with some factual data in there as well. So by all means, I'm not trying to persuade you to grow a certain way or do things a certain way. These are just some offerings and suggestions from some of the experience that I've gained over the years from starting seeds. And with that, we'll go ahead and get going. So growing vegetables, that's kind of the whole point of starting seeds. This is going to be a table discussion. I'm at my kitchen table this morning. But kind of why we want to start seeds. Is there really a reason for it? Is there a necessity to start seeds? I would probably argue that yes, it's important. The whole intent of starting seeds, especially indoors, getting prepared for the growing season, is to enjoy the harvest of the crops that we're trying to plant. And so really, why do we want to grow vegetables? This is primarily what this discussion is going to entail. But we're going to be growing vegetables for a number of reasons. One, we want to have a high quality taste in the food that we're eating. We want to control what we eat, try and limit the unknown food that we're consuming, eliminating GMOs, things like that. Vegetables that are grown in not the most ideal setting or situations, have a lot of cultural value, cultural reason for growing. And ultimately, we want to save money. I think here in the pandemic that we're still in, I think that a lot of people are seeing the importance of growing vegetables to not only be able to provide for our families, but save money in these times of economic uncertainty. So really, when we start preparing to grow seeds, we really have to look at what we want to grow. We have to understand Pueblo, we have a harsh climate here. It's could swing between an extreme heat, low moisture content, difficult soil to grow in. So it's not as easy as other locations might be. We want to think about what we could grow here. I always offer out, don't be afraid to try something new. Don't be afraid to try something that you might have grown up with if you don't originate from Pueblo or from Colorado. If you come from a colder climate, don't be afraid to try new things. But with that being said, some things are going to be grown a little bit easier here, where others are going to present a little bit more difficulty and possible frustration in their inability to grow or grow successfully. You might want to just choose something that you can't buy. Some heirloom type vegetables, things that may not be coming through our farmers markets, our stores, the produce section. Grow something unique, something that you just kind of want to try. You hear a lot of examples and stories of exotic food, in my opinion. Why not try growing something like that? And then grow what you can. Even if we're growing minimal produces, crops, varieties of things, just grow what you can. Not everybody's going to have the space or the location to, really grow mass produce in an urban setting. So just grow what you can. These are just some pictures of some previous seasons. You know, obviously I enjoy eating tomatoes, so I grow a lot of tomatoes. So when should you grow? Well, here in Pueblo, we should probably grow spring, summer, and fall. I know it's January 30th. This month went by really quickly, so before we know it, we'll be into the spring season, when we'll start wanting to get our cole crops ready. We'll want to make sure we have seeds germinated inside and preparing for summer planting. But really, those are the 3 seasons that we should be growing through. One of the things that I've learned is kind of time. I think I have a slide later on, but time is a variable within our growing cycle. So I like to use calendars and holidays as references. I think the Super Bowl is coming up here pretty soon. That's typically been the starting point for when I want to get seeds germinated. It's kind of provided opportunity for unsuccessful germination or successful germination and getting plants ready and acclimated prior to planting. I'm a big proponent that the early bird gets the worm. You don't want to be too late. It doesn't hurt to get an early start on things. We as growers and gardeners, we have the opportunity to tend and take care of these plants and really nurture them if we need you for a little bit longer times by being just a little bit early. And then we just want to make sure we're growing throughout the seasons. It's not always easy. We always plan, but things don't always work out to plan. So really try to focus on growing throughout the entire growing seasons. These are just some more pictures of some produce. I like showing these ones because these are seeds that I did not start indoors. Not every seed's going to be ideal for starting inside. Kind of in that light, where would we want to grow? Might want to grow in a planter, maybe the ground, raised beds, containers. These are all different locations to place our plants to grow. I like this time of the year because we're able to look through the numerous pictures in our phones, computers, looking back on the previous season and kind of start getting that cabin fever broke a little bit and start really looking forward to the growing season. So these are just some older pictures, probably a couple years old, of stuff that I've grown. So this is always a question I pose. I don't really offer my opinion on it anymore because it's changed over the years. And I encourage everyone to think freely and really explore different ways we could grow. But we could grow organically. I want to grow diversely. I'm a big proponent of biodiversity. I'm trying to get as much variety in my growing seasons. I've learned very quickly after several years, grow practically. Do things as easy as you can. One of the things I've learned and I've had to come to accept, I'm not a farmer. I live in the city. I don't have the ability to not go to work and spend all the time in the garden and really steward it the way I would want. So I have to grow practically. I have to be able to have automation in my watering systems. I have to be able to do things easily, understanding that I might have a little bit of time before work and then after work to really work in the garden and work out issues that I have. And then we have to be adaptable. Nothing's more frustrating than seeing crops or plants that we've put a lot of time and effort into attacked by insects, weather, didn't go outside for a couple days, didn't realize my watering system has failed. So we have to be able to adapt. We have to be able to move quickly and be able to think on our feet just a little bit. Just some more little teasers. just some more locations of where we grow the ground, a little planter up there in the top right corner. Little example of some of the diversity of chilies. I like to eat a lot of chili, some hot, some not hot at all. So it doesn't hurt to have just a little variety in there. But this is why everybody came today. How do we start seeds indoors? What I've learned over the years, I have to make it as easy as I can. I've ruined a lot of seeds. I've ruined a lot of floor coverings, trying to grow inside, knowing that moisture, dirt, things like that are going to be involved. So really, this is a 10-step simple guide that I've kind of focused on over the last 5 or 6 years. The first thing, we want to select the seed. We want to choose something that is going to do well starting indoors. We'll discuss that in a few more slides, but one of the things that I stay away from, I don't start root crops inside. I don't start radishes, things like that indoors. I want to start something that's going to be growing during the summer months, a tender crop, and I've really focused it down to pretty much 3 things that I'll grow indoors: tomatoes, chilies, and maybe some eggplants. Everything else is going to get seeded directly outdoors into their growing location. But we want to select seed. We want to select quality seed. We want to select fresh seed. I have, over the years, experimented on different generations of seed that I've saved, going back to 2nd, 3rd generation seed. Had little success or just way too many inconsistencies in what I was looking for versus, the 5th or 6th generation seed that was more fresh and more adapted. We want to select seed that is going to do well in our climate. I know it's tempting to try importing a lot of seeds, but I want to try and get everything as localized as I can. The seed library is a great source for that. There's also some other local seed banks and seed catalogs that have seeds specific to our region and climate. And then I want to prepare my germination area. I used to have a bedroom that was dedicated to growing my seeds. It's now since been turned into a nursery for a baby, not for my plants. So I've had to relocate that. And so now I'm scrambling to find the space that I used to use to get everything prepared in. But we want to try and keep something in a controlled climate, something that's not going to have a lot of temperature swings. It is winter, so as we're starting to grow things inside, we want to try and find a location in the house that doesn't have those large temperature swings from cold to hot and back and forth. We want to try and have something a little bit more controlled. We want to have something that's easily cleanable, an area that we don't mind having a little bit of water splashing around, a little bit of dirt splashing around, but we also want to try and maintain a little bit of cleanliness of our area. The less contaminants we take into that area, the better off we're going to be. Somewhere with dirt, dust, cobwebs, might want to clean that up prior to setting up any sort of germination. So what I like to use are the Jiffy pallets, the little black trays with the little greenhouse coverings, plastic coverings, work great. And the Jiffy pallets are pretty cheap, but they're pretty effective as well. And so what I like to do is if you're not familiar with them, they're just the little round discs of dirt, soil. They absorb water and they puff up into a little 2-3 inch pallet type thing. And then we're able to place our seeds in there. What I've learned early on is they expand and absorb water quicker if I pre-soak them in a hot water. So typically I'll fill up a 5-gallon bucket, throw in my Jiffy pellets in there, let them absorb that water. They expand a lot nicer this way instead of using cold water. They do it a lot quicker. But then kind of what that hot water does is it also starts creating a little bit of condensation and bringing some heat into that seed to really get it to crack open and germinate a little bit more effortlessly. So once I get my seed pellet or Jiffy pellets expanded, I'll drop about 3 to 4 seeds into each pellet, and then I'll place those into the trays. This is where things get a little bit tricky, and a little bit of preparation goes a long way. I think a standard size seed tray, you could fit about 72 Jiffy pellets, which is quite a bit. But we have to start thinking ahead for transplanting those pellets into their next phase, which is a seedling, and then as we grow it throughout a little bit of time indoors. So that little 72 count inside of a container, once we go into the next size container, we have to start growing our size. So I think at the end of the day, when I transplant my little pallets into a container, I end up with about 16 inside one of those trays. So definitely need a little bit of space. But by placing 3 to 4 seeds into each pallet, I've learned and have experienced just a little bit greater chance for one of those seeds to germinate and allow for further growth. What I've also learned is placing these in a dark area seems to be key. So what I've done is I've previously closed off the windows with some black trash bags in the room that I was using before. I've covered these trays up with really thick blankets. Now what I do is I just put black trash bags over the top of the trays as they're once I get them established. For me, the darkness just seems to work well. The seeds will start to germinate, and then in about 7 to 10 days, some a little bit sooner, some a little bit longer, I'll look underneath the plastic bag and see if anything's starting to germinate at that point. I don't know that scientifically if this has any effect on anything if you don't have them in a dark area, but what I've experienced is when I've limited light filtration into the room and just covered them up in dark, they tend to germinate just a little bit quicker. So I don't know if there's a true correlation there or not. This is just, again, what I focus on. And then the key, this is really tough. I learned early on, I'd want to check those seeds every hour, every half hour. I'd walk away and then turn around and see if anything was germinating. You got to give them the time. So I try not to disturb those seed trays for 7 to 10 days, just to allow that seed the time to break open and germinate. This is also kind of important in timing. I know it's January 29th or 30th. We might be saying, hey, I got, until May, Mother's Day, before I'm going to be putting any tomatoes into the ground. Outside, I have time. Well, if we start to think about it, if I'm allowing 7 to 10 days for germination, and all of a sudden at day 10, if I were to plant something today, that'd be February 9th, I believe. If nothing's happened, I have to go through this process again. And so then now I'm waiting until January or February 19th to see if anything's germinated. So this is where being a little bit early can be beneficial, knowing that it's going to take time for those seeds to germinate. It's going to take time to really get them established and grown indoors before we're able to transplant them. So if I'm going through this process mid-March, late March, early April, I might be cutting it close to having anything to plant come Mother's Day. If not, all of a sudden, middle of May, beginning of May, I'm putting seeds into the soil, and then I'm allowing them 7 to 10 days to germinate, to sprout. Now I'm looking at end of May, beginning of June before anything's really even starting to grow. And so we're just cutting our growing season short. Some seeds that have a long maturing date may not be successful. We may not have a harvest come October. So this is really important, just to give them the time that they need. Once the seedlings sprout, this is when I want to introduce a light source. This was a tricky thing for me early on, trying to find a light source that was economical, affordable, easy to operate, something that I could hang and allow to provide the light needed for those sprouts. Since then, I've invested. This is probably the biggest investment in my growing, my light sourcing. So I have probably 3 4-foot, 4 ballast light sources, and then I just got a 4-foot by 4-foot grow light. So I have a lot of lights that are pushing on these plants. But it's very important once that seedling sprouts to introduce a light source. Light is what's going to help push the photosynthesis process, and it's very critical to get it introduced as soon as we can. Once seedlings sprout, I've placed 3 to 4 seeds in each pallet. Sometimes all 4 of them sprout, sometimes 1, sometimes 2. What I do is I just try to select 1 or 2 just to grow a little bit further before I start removing other sprouts. So if I have 4 tomatoes growing in a Jiffy pallet, I might let the 2 that look the strongest or the tallest, whatever I feel is more important. Got my dogs barking, but I'm going to select 1 or 2 of those, and that's what I'm going to continue to allow to grow indoors. It doesn't make any sense to try and grow 4 tomatoes in one little pallet. They're going to choke each other out, going to compete, kind of limit the competition to 1 or 2 seeds. So this is what I've also found to be very important. Once roots start to pop through the Jiffy pallets, I need to get those pallets transplanted into something with a little bit more soil, get a little bit more nutrients to those plants. What works for me, solo cups, the little red cups get at the dollar store. I'll fill those up with my growing medium, and I'll place those Jiffy pallets inside of that growing medium. This really helps establish some root growth, which is kind of what we're after. We want to make sure that those plants are going to be able to succeed when we transplant them outdoors. But what I've learned is by not doing this, the roots are going to be susceptible to contamination. If I don't have enough water in my container, they start to dry out. And so it just really starts to stress those plants out. So the greater success that I've had is transplanting them into some sort of pot or cup. I've had mixed fillings going on the compositable peat cups. Sometimes they work well, sometimes they degrade a little bit over the course of a few months, and so by the time I go to transplant them, they're falling apart. They're really not as ideal or suitable for my my needs. So the solo cups, they're reusable. They work great. The 10th factor in this is we got to keep them alive. It's nice to start seeds indoors, but once we get that seed germinated, it's growing, now it's our responsibility to keep them alive. We have to allow them the opportunity to finish their growing life cycle. So we just want to keep them indoors for anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks before we transplant them, or before we harden them off and transplant them outdoors. And so this is where, again, it's kind of critical, finding that balance in timing of getting the seeds germinated, growing them, and then getting them ready to transplant come early May, mid-May, when we typically would plant our plants. So typically, what do I want to start indoors? I want to start those summer crops, our tender vegetables, crops that are easily transplanted. Again, I stay away from root crops. I just have not had any success trying to grow a radish inside and then transplanting it outdoors. I want to make it as simple as I can. I want to make it a staple in my my consumption of food throughout the summer months. So this is what I found. These are some excellent choices for seeds to start indoors. Tomatoes. Tomatoes are great to start indoors. Peppers, whether it's a chili, bell pepper, eggplants, things like this, they tend to lend themselves very well to starting indoors and then transplanting them outdoors. So okay choices. I've had okay success in doing this. I know other individuals within the Master Gardener community and within the growing community that has participated in the years past have had success growing cucumbers, melons, things like that indoors. To me, the effort that I want to put, the time and energy that I want to put into growing something indoors, cucumbers and melons really haven't paid off for me. So those I just plant directly outdoors, seed outdoors. So what do we need to have successful germination? In my opinion, these are the required needs. One, we have to have the freshest localized seed available. If we do this, we're going to have a little bit better opportunity to see those seeds germinate successfully. Moisture, got to have a little bit of moisture. We don't want to have cold moisture. We want to have room temperature or greater. Room temperature being 70 to 74 degrees. That's within that ideal range of 60 to 80 degrees for seed germination on these plants. Just a little bit of warmth. Like I mentioned before, all of our situations are a little bit different. Some areas that we try to germinate in fluctuate in temperature with that swing from cold to warm, too hot, too cold. We just want to have a little bit of warmth. This could be provided through a heating mat, a seedling mat, providing some additional heat. It may not. It just depends where we're comfortable. Our house, we keep at about 72, 73 degrees. So it's, in my opinion, right there in the sweet spot for providing that warmth for the seeds. And then just a little bit of darkness. I put it under required because, in my opinion, I guess I do think darkness helps. Some optional things, any seed. Don't be afraid to put whatever seed you have, whether it's older, whether you picked it up from a catalog from the northeast region of the country, if it came from Cambodia, it really doesn't matter. If you have seed, I always say try to grow it. Warming pads. Warming pads are excellent for some situations, some folks. I don't really use a warming pad. I've cooked a lot of Jiffy pellets using one, so just keep that in mind. They can provide anywhere from 10 to 20 degrees additional heat. So we just want to watch it that we're not overcooking those seeds. This I personally don't have much experience in. Some individuals really say it works well for them. Freezing the seeds prior to germination, kind of letting it simulate that winterization, where the seed's going through winter and then it's getting ready to germinate in the spring once that freeze has kind of been removed. And soaking seeds prior to germination. This works for some folks. For me, I've not really found a difference one way or another by soaking those seeds prior to germination. So some of the things that we have to regulate. One, we have to regulate our temperature control. So ideally, we want to be between that 60 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit. This seems to be the optimal growing temperature for seeds, for germination. Temperatures over 80 degrees might just be a little bit too harsh. If it's under 60 degrees, it may not kick in that process to incorporate the germination. Moisture, the seeds have to be moist, not sopping wet, but they can't be dry either. If we put a dry seed into soil, don't give any water to it, probably nothing's going to happen. If we have too much water, same thing. It might be a little bit adverse to the germination. Things might start to grow a little bit moldy. Things might just be a little bit too much for them. So having a little bit of moisture in there is going to be key. And then the darkness. After germination is the seeds have germinated, they're going to seek light. I got a picture coming up for that photosynthesis. But in my opinion, I don't think light is what causes germination. Light is what causes growth, causes that photosynthesis. So the darkness, the seeds are going to pop through there and they're going to seek out the light. And this is a great picture of it. We have this bean down here at the bottom. Might be getting a little bit of light filtration through the depth of the soil, but you can see it's germinating. It's starting to sprout there. Got some roots already growing, and all of a sudden it's finding its way to the light. So that's kind of why I like to introduce darkness to those seeds early on, and then remove darkness and introduce the light source once they germinate, once they pop through that soil. I wish this was a picture of mine, but I always end up with a few seeds that washed out of the Jiffy pallets and onto the seed tray. I've tried growing them a few times. I've tried transplanting them into soil. Sometimes I've been successful, sometimes not. Sometimes they're a lost cause. And now I'm going to stop sharing the screen, and if I can figure out how. And we got some questions. And I'm looking back through the chat. It looks like there's a few. Callie mentioned this is a hard part in learning. Yes, we fail forward together. What about the warming effect? How important is it? Does it depend on the crop whether to use a warming pad under the tray? I don't necessarily know if it is dependent on the crop to use a warming tray. Those ideal temperatures for tomatoes, the chilies, the eggplants that I tend to stick to growing indoors, they all fall within the same range for seed germination, which is that 60 to 80 degrees. I think that's kind of what I work on. Like I mentioned at the beginning, I have a name tag that says Master Gardener. I'm not a scientist or an expert, so I've tried to remove some of those questions just to make things a little bit easier. Do I have a recommended light style for starts? So I like LED lights. For me, they're just, they don't get overly hot. One of the first light sources that I used would also provide ambient temperature to those plants, and it would just start to get way too hot. I'm not a light expert, but I try to keep everything in that daylight lumen range. What I'm really after is trying to mimic light patterns that the plants are going to find once they're put outdoors. So I'll have lights on typically maybe about 10 hours, 12 hours at most. That way, when they're into the summer months, that's kind of the amount of light that they're going to have. I also keep the light on a timer. And so I'll have that timer come on at about 5:15, 5:30 in the morning, and then it'll shut off about 7 o'clock at night. That way, once I put them outdoors, they're not trying to readapt to a new light cycle. So those are really great questions. Distance from the light to the tray. And yes, I am using the clear dome over the tray until the plants reach the top of that tray. And then I remove it, and then I allow them to just grow freely. What I've learned with the LED lights, you could get them fairly close, maybe within a couple inches of the plants. Prior with the other light sources, as I mentioned, I was cooking my plants. So really it's just kind of dependent on the type of light. The LEDs don't put off that heat. So you're able to get just a little bit closer. And what I've done, I wish I had a picture of it, but I've built kind of like a little hanging mechanism with some ballasts can't think of the word right now. Anyways, the light's attached to it on some rope, and I just spin this little thing and it raises the light as the plants grow. And so I do raise the lights as plants grow. What size of solo cup? The ones that I use are party size. I think they're 12 to 16 ounce. I could be making that up completely, but those seem to work the best for me. At one time, I've tried, when I used to use the composable peat cups, I would start in a 4-inch cup, go to a 6-inch cup, go to an 8-inch cup. What I've learned is you run out of room very quickly. If you don't have the space to grow that in, I don't recommend that at all. But the solo cup seems to work pretty well in those situations. Culinary herbs, direct sow or start indoors? That's a great question. So to be truthful, I don't have a lot of experience growing culinary herbs. The ones that I have grown have been sown directly outdoors. I don't see why this wouldn't be something to start indoors, especially if you're going to be transplanting them to a planter or a raised bed somewhere. By all means, yeah, I would say probably wouldn't hurt to start some indoors. And Callie, you got a lot of good questions. Awesome. Do I have recommendations for crops will grow best permanently in a container versus the ground after the 6 to 8 weeks in a solo cup? Let me see if I'm reading this right. Sarah, correct me if I'm misinterpreting this. I would say whatever I transplant to the container or the ground is going to grow permanently throughout its life cycle. I'm not going to retransplant something after it's put into its location, whether it's a container or a ground. I don't have any. I don't grow one crop over another. I've grown tomatoes in the ground successfully that I've germinated indoors, as well as the same tomatoes in containers. They've grown just as well. The thing to remember is the growing source that we're in, containers, as long as they're provide the depth needed for root growth, you should have success growing those crops. Trial and error experiences. One of the biggest trial and errors that I've learned is it's been a goal of mine for the last several years to have 100 chili plants. So I've tried germinating, 150, 200 chilies, and then all of a sudden I don't have enough light for them. I don't have enough space on the floor to germinate them. So I'd say one of the biggest trial and error experiences is trying to overdo things. A couple years back, I had 48 tomatoes. My garden's fairly large, but 48 tomatoes is just a bit too much. And so I ended up having to find homes for some of those plants. A lot of them just really didn't do too well. And then just the space restraints, trying to grow too many things under a small light source isn't advantageous. So those were definitely some of the early trial and error experiences. Jody, hopefully we covered the light distance, just a couple inches above the plant, adjusting as that plant grows. And what do I use to poke holes in the cups? Oh, that's a great question. I use scissors or a knife, and I'll just kind of poke maybe 3 to 4 holes, maybe about the size of a hole punch. That seems to work fairly well for me. And I don't put them directly at the bottom of the cup. I put them maybe within a 1/4 inch from the bottom up on the side. That way what I do is I'll have my tray, the cup will sit in there, and then I fill that tray up with water. And so that water is able to be transported up through the roots into through the cup on those holes. I don't know if it makes a difference having holes at the bottom of the cup, but in my thinking, I figured it'd be a little bit easier for that water to absorb through the sides. And Trina and Dan, I'd lean into them for their expertise. Dan's in the greenhouse. Trina mentioned that she's sown herbs and veggies both in containers and ground, and has done well with both. And the greenhouse has their red tomatoes already. I'm not surprised.
Awesome. I think you pretty much covered all the questions, Jared. Thank you. That was a really good presentation. And like you mentioned, Dan's in the greenhouse. Oh, I think there's one more that came in, but in the meantime, Dan is in the greenhouse, and he wanted to give us a little sneak peek of some of his red tomatoes to get us all excited for spring.
So
Oh, kind of froze up there on my end, Dan. I don't know if it's my internet. Oh, there we go. You're moving now.
do I have audio?
Yep,
Okay.
we can hear you now.
Yeah, a couple of things here. I want to show you a garden that we've actually been using in some of the of you.
Well, shoot, it looks like we might have lost Dan. We did have one more. Maybe while Dan pops back on, Jared. Somebody, their growing season is only 90 days in Westcliff. If they start seeds too early, they get leggy. How far ahead do you think maybe they should start?
I'm on mute. So that's a great question. The first thing I would recommend, you're living in Westcliff, or Westcliff, Penn Parmenter, Penn and Cork Parmenter. I would look into their seed catalog. They're up there in Westcliff. They have great seeds. They've developed a lot of produce that will grow in Westcliff in that short amount of time. Specifically, their tomatoes that ripen, or not tomatoes, pumpkins that ripen on the vine up there in Westcliff in 90 days. So definitely look into them. I can't recall their website, but if you were to Google Penn Parmenter, Penn Parmenter, they would pop up, and wonderful people. With that, make sure whatever you're growing has a short maturation date. So you're probably going to want to shy away from anything in that 180-day range. You might be pushing it at 100, 120. So try to keep everything in a short growth cycle. But kind of with that being said, if you're looking at something at 100 or 90 days, you're growing in that 100, 120-day range. That might give you a wiggle room of maybe about 30 to 50 days prior to transplanting. And that would kind of allow you to grow some of those longer type crops. I hope that helps a little bit.
Awesome, thanks, Jared. I don't see Dan back on yet. He having some connection issues there, Trina?
I think we are, because sometimes out in the barn, you don't get such good audio. I just texted him and told him he dropped out.
Okay, all right. Well, you
Yeah.
know,
But he did leave this on my desk.
Okay, there we go. There it is. There's our inspiration, that nice red tomato from the Basics greenhouse. That's awesome. Well, maybe
Yeah.
hopefully we can get a sneak peek into the greenhouse on our presentation next month. But thank you for showing us what is possible. And thank you, Jared, so much for your awesome presentation. And thank you to all of our 26 participants for joining us this morning. Please be sure to check out our presentation on the last weekend of February and the last Saturday of every month this year. And we will see everybody soon.